Robbins Sr., and we'll be talking about how racism affects our community as a whole. I think there are a couple of reasons why racism exists in society. One, people feel threatened. Two, people are unsure or unclear about an individual perception. Three, I think that a lack of understanding and education can cause someone of a different culture to act a certain way to a different group, ethnic group to be a fact. In my lifetime, I give you an example. I graduated from high school. I was only 15 years old, going on 16. I went to Oklahoma. Racism I first encountered was in Stillwater, Oklahoma. I was walking to Taco Bell and a group of guys on the truck spit on me as I was walking by. To me, it doesn't bother me because they kept going, but they was too scared to even come back to say anything besides run. I look at life in different perspectives. One, good, bad, and unjust. That's why the Statue of Liberty has one hand held high and the Lady of Justice is blindfolded. The scale is tipped. For which group or ethnic group, it depends on who's looking and who's talking. I think we as a race should understand that everyone is not bad. You have bad apples in each bunch. We can look at society being unjust doing to the police department and what we see around the world today. I think that in society, we have branded certain ethnic groups to be a deterrent or be a outcast due to the color of someone's skin. I think that discrimination can be on all levels, regardless of what group, ethnic group you are, white, black, blue, Chinese, Vietnamese, we all are being discriminated, but on what level? Now, we know statistics talks about African American males are the most likely to be stopped or killed on a regular basis. We know that because we see it every day in society. But I think that if education in these departments and a diverse of law enforcement, meaning that we need to have more African American males on the police force and more African American males in the community that deals with that race. When you have a different culture in the area of African Americans, you're going to have a problem because those law enforcement do not understand our culture. Their culture is totally different from ours. The same as if you had African American males in a Caucasian area of society, we will not understand how to deal with them on their level. So we need to have diversity, more education, more training, and a psychological exam on each individual that has a badge or carry a badge because they are a public servant. I think in society, we have to stop putting a stigmatism on culture, race, and diversity due to where you come from, the color of your skin. I think that as a whole, we as a nation needs to come together. We have overcome obstacles since 1922, and that's the year my dad was born, February 28, 1922. I learned a lot from him. He said, just because a person acts or seems to feel a certain way about you, you should not be threatened. As long as he or she does not put their hands on you, you should not have a problem. Now, with that being said, I think a lot of law enforcement we see today of different ethnic background or taking their status and their legal expertise to a different level when you're dealing with different cultures or ethnic background because they're more vulgar, more aggressive, and they would normally try to attain you or comprehend, meaning try to detain you a certain way where you are injured in the process. I think they should treat everybody the same way. They have tasers, but in our society, they shoot first and ask questions later. I think that's not fair, because if we look at the incident happened in North Carolina when an individual went into a church house and killed a lot of individuals, and they took him to get him something to eat. I have never heard of that in my entire life, as long as I've been living, where you take an individual who just killed an individual and take him out to eat. Now, you take another individual, Vietnamese, Chinese, American, African American, Latino. How do that fare to us if we would do something like that? Do you think that's fair? No. I think there's a line drawn when law enforcement take it in their own hands. And I don't know if that officer was reprimanded or whatever, but those are certain instances we have to really pay attention to in certain departments. We have a lot of departments within society, I mean law enforcement, the sheriff, the city, state troopers, that needs to be tweaked a little bit. We don't mean change, but we need to tweak the system, because I think that the system is not made for different ethnic groups to be diverse in handling the situation. Like you have more mentally ill patients now in society where law enforcement do not know how to deal with these individuals. And you wind up shooting a mentally ill individual because he or she does not understand your commands. But you have to understand there should be someone on each patrol in every unit that is trained to deal with certain instances, certain medical issues a patient or individual can have, regardless of what ethnic background there are. But I think we need to vamp the whole law enforcement system and get rid of this good boy system. We can see it in society due to Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. If these obstacles did not come out in society, I think things would be worse today than it was back then. Now we can put everything on the news, we can put it on media, social media, where we can show society these law enforcement officers are taking advantage of their job description as serve and protect. We pay these individuals to save the less than fortunate of people that's being harmed, like women when their house are broken in or they're attained or try to be raped by someone. We need law enforcement on both sides. We have to understand that we are human beings just like they are. When they get off from work, they are human beings and would like the same respect that you give someone else. My dad used to tell me a long time ago, he said, you treat someone like you want to be treated. I think we jump to conclusions on certain things when we see different ethnic groups. When you see a group of individuals walking together or driving together, you're assuming that they are up to something no good or serious or delinquent behavior. I think that is a false notion, because we as a race have always been stigmatized down the history, from slavery to segregation into today's society. I think that the norm is we still living in the past, but we move to the future. It's an old saying, your past is your future and your future is your past. That means the mistakes you used to do, you don't do them anymore. You learn from the mistakes to make who you are. There's no book on what's right or wrong. There's no book on how to raise kids. There's no book on how to live. But what we can do is respect each other. Give everyone the respect that you would like to have in society. Racism is so broad today in society, just by looking at our president today, Donald Trump. He says some things that I don't realize that he really understands. He is talking to the world. You are the commander in chief. So you have to understand when you are talking, You have to make certain statements that does not infringe on anybody's rights, religious beliefs, or just attributes of society. We know that everybody has different mannerism of how they speak or what they say and how they feel about what they see. But we have to understand, we have to be cordial to everyone. As Commander-in-Chief, I think you need to go over your information or whatever title or whatever script you're reading just to make sure that it sounds comprehended to the point that when you're speaking to society, they understand you clearly. Some people don't, some people do. I think there's nothing wrong in how he says what he say. We have demeanors on how we say certain things. I think that we as a race, we learn something new every day. And that something new is from childhood to young adult to adult and to be a grown man or woman. I think we as society have to come to grips with ourselves. And we're gonna always have bad apples in the bunch. But still, you don't have to treat everybody like they are the ones that did you something. We see things every day on TV in society. We see everything up front in society every day. When we go to the grocery store, we go to the mall, we see some negativity, but that's life. You got to understand that you cannot have good unless you have bad. We have to balance things out. In order to get things done like racism, we have to come together as a nation. We can say, oh, the cops are no good, but that's not true. You have good cops out there. We have cops that will fight for you. Even when their partner's disrespecting you, they will step up and say, hey, that's not right. We have to abide by the rules and guidelines and regulations that governs us as to serve and protect. We have to understand that I think society has gotten out of hand. And I think that we all need to take a step back and evaluate how we look at racism. Racism is how we look at deviant behavior. When I say deviant behavior, it means it can mean anything. A person, language, body language, physical language, mentally or physically, how we incorporate that into society. Whatever you do in your home, especially the privacy of your home, that's your business. But when it's in society and the whole world sees what you do or what you say, it becomes a hindrance because now people looking at you in a negative way. You can do all the good in the world, but they only remember that one bad thing you do in life. For what I understand about racism is don't let it get to you to the point where your heart is bitter. Your heart, it has malice in it. We have to understand that people will agree to disagree to whatever your language, your attitude, or how you feel about a cultural, ethnic background, whatever your status may be. But we have to start somewhere. And that somewhere is we have to start with our leaders. We have to start with the Republicans, the Democrat that makes these laws. Laws are in effect every year in June are amended. You cannot take away from the law. You can add to it. We have to understand, we have to educate ourselves on a daily basis, regardless of what race or ethnic background you are from. But we have to educate ourselves so if we ever get caught in a situation that we feel that is uncomfortable, maybe life-threatening, we know how to deal with the situation instead of jumping and saying racism. We can say racism all we want. We know there are individuals out there very unjust to different cultures. We know that. That is a given. But how we deal with the situation, move forward, is learning from it, educating ourselves. So if this do happen, we know what precautions we can take and what steps we can do so we can get this individual off the force and stop him from moving to another department or another state and doing the same thing. We have to hold law enforcement accountable for each and every individual they are interacting with or have a criminal behavior detainee as stopping or anytime they use their weapons. If it's unjust or justified, every cop has rules and regulations. If they fire their weapon, they are put on administrative leave and get paid. But this is the problem. If you know this officer committed a crime, charge him with that crime. Don't do the good boy system, that buddy system, and give him a slap on the wrist and then he do it again. And then the state has to pay the family members for a wrongful death. I think that is insane. I think we should have everybody accountable for their actions. Law enforcement, civilians, and society as a whole. These laws are here to govern us so we can be safe on both sides. That's the law enforcement and civilian, because guess what? Law enforcement has family too. They want to go home safely back to their family, but we have to make sure they are trained properly. We have to make sure mentally and physically they are equipped and prepared to go to work and able to function in certain society or backgrounds or placed in their sector. Each law enforcement comes in, they get a debrief, they don't know which area they're going to be working in, so we have to understand we need some diversity. Always have two. If you have a Caucasian, African American, Vietnamese, Chinese, Mexican, make sure if you're going in that community, have somebody riding with you that knows that community, that can relate that community, because sometimes some individuals cannot understand or comprehend what another individual from a different culture is trying to say. So you would take that as a defense mechanism and putting that your life is in jeopardy when it's not. Now we have to understand by educating ourselves on a different level and treating people like they are human beings instead of trash and dogs or what they call monkey. We hear this all the time. But guess what? Everybody doesn't feel that way. It's an old saying, you can say whatever you want. The First Amendment says you have the freedom of speech. But just remember, what you say may be taped. What you do may be seen. What you say and do will be seen by society, your boss, people you know, and then they're going to look at you in a whole different perspective. Now you'll put yourself out there, whereas they look at you as being racist. And you could be white and stigmatized as a racism. You could be black and be stigmatized as a racism. You can be Vietnamese, Mexican, Latino. You can be stigmatized as racism. So it's not just one ethnic background. We have to understand that there are reasons why people act like that. Some people are scared, some people are inferior to different ethnic backgrounds. And if that's the case, I don't think they should be on the job. They should not have the authority to wear a badge or be in a position where they have the authority to change a person's livelihood. We have too many people that are going to jail and come out 20 years later knowing that they was innocent. We have to take time to evaluate the whole situation instead of getting a conviction first due to a person's ethnic background or they fit the description, even though that is not the individual. We have to educate the world. Each individual have their perception of how we look at each other. We pass each other every day at work. We pass each other every day at school. But one thing we do know, kids does not see color. When you get a bunch of kids in pre-K, kindergarten, look at them and put them together. They don't care, don't even know what color is. So let's go back to old school fundamentals. That means respect each other. Once we respect each other, we can move forward in life. We can understand society. We can try to alleviate much as racism we can. We can never get rid of it, but we can try to ascertain and control the outbreak of individuals that are bitter about other individuals' society status. I think that we as a race have to have an understanding and a foundation to know that we are just trying to do the same thing the next person is. We're trying to work, take care of our family, making sure we come home to our family, and make sure we are financially stable. That's why we work in society, regardless of what job you have. But it has nothing to do with racism. We are doing something that we have been doing all these years, is going to work and trying to be part of society and trying to make a difference. Everybody's trying to make a difference in society. It's how you go about making that difference. I think me as a person, I'm very blunt. I don't care what people say about me. I don't care what people do. As long as they do not put their hands on me, as long as they do not put me in jeopardy or put my life or my family in jeopardy, I have no problem with that. But when you cross the line, I don't care who you are. There's going to be consequences to both sides. But we have to understand. We have to understand that knowledge is the key. We should keep a calm and cool collective head and think about our actions before we do. I think if we think about what we're going to do first can solve 90% of the effects of what may happen afterwards. I think we need to come together as a world, society, and make the change within ourselves. We always tell our kids what to do, but we don't explain to them why they should do it. That's the problem. We always telling our kids, don't do this, don't do that. But how many of us sat down with our kids and literally explained to our kids, this is the reason why. I have been down this road. I know the outcome. So I'm trying to save you heartaches in the long run. You are going to make mistakes, but these type of mistakes, I can teach you and give you explanation why you should not do this, because in the long run, you will be better off by understanding what the consequences can be. By doing that, and that means by explaining. If we do not communicate with each other, we cannot solve the problem. We can't have one side agreeing and the other side disagreeing. We have to come to a medium. We have to come to a balance of understanding of pros and cons. Sigmund Freud said we had the id, the ego, and the superego. A lot of people think with the id. And at the end of the day, Sigmund Freud was right. Because the way we look at society on a daily basis, we put negativity on one ethnic background, two ethnic backgrounds, or all ethnic backgrounds. But do that solve the problem? No. Because everybody of all color and ethnic background commit crimes. It's not just one person, not two people. It's just the ethnic background. But to me, I think as a society, I think we need to educate ourselves. We need to get with our leaders, get with the senators, the congressmen, the representatives, and find a solution to the problem so we can find a conjunctive way of this, what word can I use? Unjust society when we dealing with law enforcement. I have dealt with law enforcement, some good, some bad. I have not been stopped for anything besides assuming that I was drinking and driving, or I was in a neighborhood driving a car that I should not be driving. I've been stopped a couple of times. But how I handled the situation, even though the officer was rude to me, but I was nice to him and I killed him with kindness, but I was also educated at the same time in criminal justice at Langston University. But we as a whole, we can have to understand that growing up, it takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a community to change society. We can't do it alone. We can't look at what others do. Look at Martin Luther King, look at Malcolm X. It wasn't an individualism, it was a community effort. When we made a community effort, we made a change because everybody came together for one cause. And it was not just African Americans. You had whites, you had blacks, you had Latinos that came together for one cause. So Black history is just a name they give Black history, but Black history is for everyone because it's unjust on every level. We have to understand that we as a culture, We should not see color. We should see respect. We should see working together. We should see a community that's outreach to help each and every one. And I hope that with this film that we can learn something as a race, regardless of what ethnic background you have, that racism does not just affect one culture, it affects all culture on different levels. It's Black History Month. We always think Black history is just for African Americans. It's not. It's for every culture in this world that paved the way for society. Because guess what? You just don't have unjust in the African American community. You have unjust in the Latino communities. You have unjust in certain communities of Caucasian. You have so many communities out there that's unjust. We have to understand that it's just not one status. It's all status.
Let me ask, how have you experienced racism?
I experienced racism on a couple of levels.
Give me an experience in your life where you've experienced racial discrimination or prejudice. That's what we really want to hear.
What racism and prejudice I have come across was I've gotten stopped by a police officer. And he did not explain to me why he stopped him, but he didn't know I was very well educated. He assumed. He stopped me and asked me, I need to see your license and registration. I said, no. I said, why did you stop me? Not knowing that he was already being recorded by 911. A lot of individuals don't know that. You can call 911 and give 911 the description and a number of a police vehicle. Every police vehicle has a number. And when the officer comes to the door, to your window, 911 is recorded. They cannot get that information on internal affairs. So I asked this individual why he stopped me. He tried to shuck and jive me, but I killed him with kindness. And I said, well, you know what? I'll give you my license and registration if you can explain to me why you stopped me. I didn't make a legal turn. I wasn't speeding. And I didn't see I made an illegal stop or forward through. He looked at me kind of weird. And then I turned around and said, well, did you get a bolo or description of my car? So he got mad. So what I did was I called 911. I told 911 I needed sergeant and lieutenant to come to the scene. He know he cannot stop or do anything until that sergeant and lieutenant came to the scene. When that sergeant and lieutenant came to the scene, he felt wrong because the idea of the fact is he didn't know he was recorded. How I dealt with the situation is different than anyone else would because their lack of education. And this is what I'm talking about.
Let me ask you this, how did it make you feel?
It didn't make me feel any other way because my father taught me how to deal with certain situations. He said, even when you're unjust, still be nice because at the end of the day, they have nothing on you. So he didn't hurt you, he didn't harm you. He said, as long as they don't put their hands on you, you're fine. He can say whatever he wants. But at the end of the day, I still respect him. For one, he has a job to do. Two, he has a family he want to go back home to, just like I do. But the way
Why do you think he stopped you?
I know why he stopped me. I was driving a vehicle that in a certain type of neighborhood I shouldn't be driving.
What kind of vehicle was that?
Oh, I was driving a brand new CLS 550 Mercedes. I had came home, and you know, when you come home, you always want to go see your friends you haven't seen in a while.
Where's home?
Louisiana, Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Okay.
I think we all have encountered law enforcement stopping you on different occasions for different reasons, or some just trying to make a quota. Try to say you have done something, and really what they're trying to do is try to figure out is you have something in your car, have you been drinking, have you been smoking, and the main thing is they want to search your car. But how you deal with that is being nice.
Now, when the sergeant came out, what did the sergeant say?
Sergeant came up to me, asked me what's the issue. I said, I asked him why he stopped me. He hesitated. I said, you don't have to do but ask him twice. A lot of people don't know that. Law enforcement, if they do not answer you twice, that's done. You literally don't. But the situation in my case, I was already known because I worked there. I did my internship at the police department, have a criminal justice. degree. I think that
So the sergeant asked you what happened. And
we explained. He sat there and asked the officer why. He gave him some other stuff, and I said, well, no, that's not true. I said, since you up there lying to your commander, I said, but I have everything recorded on 911, but he didn't know that until after I told the sergeant that everything has been talked to, said it's being recorded by 911. And when he found that out, the officer, he told me, he said, sir, you have a nice day. He said, if you have a complaint, he said, you can go to IA, Internal Affairs, and you can make a complaint. That complaint will stay on his jacket as long as he's a law enforcement. It will always stay on. He cannot get it, cannot take it off. But I still respect him as a human being. Even though he treated me like I was a second-rate citizen.
When he treated you like a second-grade citizen, how did that make you feel?
Well, it really didn't, because being a humble guy and the Lord, my Lord and Savior, I didn't care. I really didn't care. At that time, I didn't feel threatened because, one, he didn't have his hand on his weapon. Some people get threatened real quick.
Right.
Me, I don't.
What is it about your Lord and Savior allowed you to treat him like that and to still respect him?
I respect him.
Not feel like you had been wrong. What about Lord and Savior causes you to do it?
Well, my Lord and Savior told me to be humble. He said, we can get mad, we can get angry for a short period of time, but he said, vengeance is his, said the Lord. He says in Psalm 37:4, he says, delight thyself in the Lord, I shall give thee the desires of thy heart. He already knows my desires, so I didn't have to worry about this law enforcement trying to break my spirit or try to belittle me. They talked about Jesus Christ. They whooped him, they beat him, but guess what? They still didn't break him. At the end of the day, I still drove away. And I wasn't hurt. I wasn't harmed, mentally or physically. But that made him look bad because now I was going to Internal Affairs the next day. They are the only ones that can get a copy of that recording because that recording is going to stick because his sergeant had to write a report.
Right. Now,
So,
let me ask you this. I want to stay on that religious piece. So you said that your dad taught you some things about how to react in certain situations. Do you have children?
yes, I do.
How many children do you have?
I have two
And what are they?
boys.
All right.
I have men.
How does it roll downhill what your dad taught you and what are you doing with your son?
Same thing my dad taught me. My dad was born February 28, 1922.
Okay.
I look at things in a different perspective than other people. Yes, I may get mad, but for a short period of time. But I'm going to kill you with kindness. Now, when I get quiet, that's when you have a problem. Because if I get real quiet, you need to watch out. But in other words, I had an issue. I was detained one time. I'm going to give you another answer. I was detained. The officer was very rude. And I told the officer, I said, I am a 4th degree black belt in Tai Chi. That's pressure points. I said, I can get out these handcuffs. And I did. I told him if he ever put his hands on me while I'm handcuffed, and I told him, and I would look in anybody's eyes. My dad always say, look in a man's eyes, you can tell if he's telling the truth. My grandmother would tell you two things about me. I go to church, and I'm a man of my word. I look at things like this. If I feel like I'm going to be harmed no matter what, I will retaliate, regardless of who you are. That's me. My dad said, you can do whatever you want. You can talk about me, but as long as you don't put your hands on me. Now, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I deal with the consequence. But when I'm right, I try to follow the rules and guidelines and regulations that is set forth before me by the law and by my belief. That is what I believe. But at that instant, I had to take a time out because I can do more with the pen than I can do with the sword.
Right.
So
what are you teaching your sons about that? What are you teaching your sons? What are you rolling downhill from your dad to you?
when you come into a situation like that, first thing, you hit a number. You call me ASAP. 2, I already know what the situation is. I just need to know your location. Once I find your location, get off the phone with me, call 911. Now, if the officer says something out of the way after you ask them twice, you tell that sergeant, tell 911, have the sergeant come to the scene, because by that time, I will be there. And I guarantee you, there's nothing going to happen. A dead man tells no tales. But my child, I would go to jail for my child. And I don't believe anybody would think the same way. Because I believe anybody who has kids, they're not going to let nobody harm their child. And that's the way I feel.
Ricky, how have your sons dealt with discrimination?
Well, luckily they haven't. They haven't had that issue. They haven't had that issue.
And the neighborhood that you live in Louisiana, does it still have like that type of racism around it?
When I was growing up, it was different. People were sticking together. You had the fruit man, you had the fish man coming through. It was different. When 1989 to 1990, everybody remembers when the national anthem came on, everything was off. Clubs was closing at 12 o'clock. You didn't have anything to stay past 12 o'clock. Everything was closed. That's when society was a society of respect. We didn't have this deviant behavior back then. As society and technology advanced, things started to unravel, things started to happen. I mean, we had people in certain ethnic groups to get certain type of positions. And you can look and tell how society was negated to and formulate those individuals, because you got to realize we had segregation. And segregation didn't really start happening until 1968, when African Americans and people was able to go to certain schools and deal with this. So you have to think about now, in the 60s compared to the 60s to the 80s, it wasn't that long. Now you have certain individuals that holds a title, that have different job descriptions. Some that hold job description that they were over certain individuals, and people did not like that. And they didn't think that it was fair. But I don't look at it that way. I look at racism as a lack of education, a lack of respect, a lack of knowledge. And that's what we have to look at racism as. And if we go off on the deep end and say, well, it's like white and black, no, it's not. It's more than white and black. We all will come and encounter with some negativities with law enforcement, regardless. But it's how you deal with the situation. I dealt with the situation on a different level. And I don't mind speaking that, but we have to learn from our encounters, how to educate ourselves, to not put ourselves in danger or harm. But
Oh, I'm sorry, Ricky. I want to go back to the faith.
Go ahead.
Do you believe that the role for faith and church, do you believe that there is a role with faith and church in addressing racism?
Yes. Let me say the reason why. We have churches in our community that is multicultural. That is the stepping stone. I'm not going to say stepping stone. It is the foundation of society. You have people that goes to church, and we have people that does not go to church. But the people that do go to church, regardless of what ethnic background, it's a melting pot. It's not just you got a church full of African Americans, Caucasians. You got a mixture. So you have a melting pot. So I think the church should step up a little more in the community and deal with law enforcement on that level. But we do have it in society. We don't know in other places, but we know that there are churches doing that. So I commend those churches and those pastors in that congregation that are making the difference in society, in their community as well, to take the challenge of discrimination against someone of a different background or ethnic background. I just think that we lack the education. I think some officers need more training, psychological training, evaluations. I think just more education and how to deal with a certain situation when you come about in a different ethnic background where you're not used to. We all go, let me rephrase that. We travel all over the world. We come encounter with different individuals from different cultures. And if something happens, we deal with that accordingly, right? because sometimes we don't know what's going on, so we have to deal with it accordingly to the situation. And that's the way I look at it. When law enforcement comes on a scene, they have to deal with the situation accordingly. Don't think about the negativity or what color the individual are. Give them the respect. I think if you come and talk to them respectful, you'll get the same thing.
So you recommend doing that instead of like, how do I say this? Like, you know how there would be protests and stuff about the police with that? What do you recommend it's better to basically like send a message to law enforcement?
Well, the first thing is when you're having a protest, a peaceful protest, we can protest on the actions of an officer, but that's not going to solve the problem. Because who put those individuals in that position? The lawmakers. So those are the individuals we need to go to, like our representative, our senators, our Congress, to make those changes, to make it happen. We can protest all day long, but who are we protesting to? We can protest on the aftermath of the situation. Yes, it was wrong, it was unjust. But now we need to go to our district attorneys, we need to go to our representatives, our congressmen, and our senators to make sure the due process is done, and not the good old boy system where you get an officer slap on the wrist for killing somebody knowing that you can see it on video that he was wrong. Don't give him pay, because if we get in trouble, let me give you a good example. If an individual is driving with a suspended license, well, let me rephrase it, with a DUI, his license gets suspended. Okay, if an officer, regardless of what color or creed or ethnic background, if he murders somebody, he should get the same benefits that a civilian should get. That means he should be locked up, no bond, and sit there until his court appears. I don't think he should bond himself out. You just murdered somebody, and you have it on videotape. I don't think they should get out. I think they should sit in that jail, regardless of what his record looks like, because you don't even know half of these individuals you shot. I've seen an officer kill an A student right here in Texas, shot through the car, shot him in the back of the head, a kid. I think he was 15 or 16, killed, murdered him. But the idea of the fact is he got to bail himself out of jail after he did that. I don't think that's fair. That's why the Lady of Justice is blindfolded. I think everybody should have the option to bail out. If a murder, if anybody of any color, creed, ethnic background, if you let a cop just kill somebody, knowing that you see it, we of course, and he can get bailed out, somebody else should do. It should be equal across the board. It should be no status or a status quo because you're a cop, you can get out. No. Right. Just because you're a cop don't mean you're good. Just because you're a citizen don't make you good. But the idea of the fact is when you have an individual that was an honor roll student and you kill him, shoot him from the back, what do you think that individual, I would lock him up and throw away the key. That should be the same way that goes for a cop who killed someone that does not show in any way, shape, form, or fashion that his life was threatened. I can understand if an officer's life was threatened, the individual had a weapon, but for you to fire a weapon at an unarmed kid or unarmed individual when you have tasers where the state raised all this money to get these tasers, but they don't use them.
That happened in person?
Yes.
How did others react around you?
A lot of people was angry. But the problem is what they're going to do, the citizens are going to start fighting back. And law enforcement don't want that. Because some of the law enforcement departments are hurting right now financially. Their status quo is not met, so they don't have enough officers because the bad officers has made that department look bad. So just remember, there are good cops out there, so you can't put them all in the same basket. You get what I'm saying? You can't put clean clothes with dirty clothes. You get what I'm saying? So you got to put each individual in their own bracket. You get what I'm saying? All cops are not bad. So, but if something happens like that, I think they need to revamp and look at how they deal with the situation and understand that there's some training need to be done. There's some communication, some education that needs to be done to make sure this officer is trained properly, or this officer is, fired from the force and can never hold that job or position again with a firearm.
No, I agree with you 100%. Like in the beginning, you stated that the officers have to be trained to deal with certain types of people because some
Yeah.
people might have a condition that it's hard to control, and then the officer might not know that and might kill the person just because.
And we see a lot of this right now. We see a lot of officers shooting first, and they wind up killing somebody, and the only thing they did was have a cell phone. We know as individuals that a cell phone does not look like a weapon. It's too square. So you can't tell me that you saw something just because he made a move. If you'd have tased him, guess what? You already got his nervous system, so there's no way he can pull the trigger if it was a weapon. So that means they are not knowledgeable of anatomy. Because if you tase somebody, you're dealing with the nervous system. But that means they live. And then that can save you in the long run finding out that it wasn't a weapon. It was a cell phone. Now you won't have that regret as long as you're a law enforcement that you killed someone by accident. We can stop the accidents by doing our job correctly. That's the issue.
Do you think there is a generational difference in how people handle racism?
Yes, it is. Each generation deals with racism different because we have the old way, we have the new way, and we have the new generation that's coming after us. And how they look at racism is totally different now because their type of, the new generation, they're not taking it. They're fighting back. And you see a lot of innocent officers getting killed. You can't take law into your own hands. You get what I'm saying? Because the individual you hurt may be innocent, has no dealing with the situation at hand. So we have to understand that everybody's not bad. And that's the situation. If we can understand and have the well-being of making sure that the decisions we make and the actions we take are justified, you have to have education. We have to educate all individuals in law enforcement. We have to deal with them on a daily basis because if somebody breaking your house, who are you going to call? You can't call Ghostbusters. You're going to have to call 911. So we have to understand that there's a reason why law enforcement are here because you have people that breaks the law. So everybody's not bad in law enforcement. And that's the thing. We have to understand racism is a lack of education, a lack of training, a lack of knowledge, and respect. When you find someone that has no respect, you automatically gonna assume that they racist.
Right.
Because just their action alone would tell you that.
And with all the racist encounters that you had, how has that affected you and the people around you?
It affects me on different levels. It affects me how I deal with the situation, how I interact with the situation, and how I deal with the situation. Racism to me is the word. Being in the military, the only thing I see is green. You can have racism in the military, but it's an individual. It's not a group thing. Racism is a word that people use to deter everybody else from what the main issue is. We use racism when we want to deter people from the main issue. That means, well, we talk about racism, but we forget somebody just got killed, but we use the racism. Well, we have people not getting paid, but we use racism. We have people that's hungry, but we use racism. We have people that's homeless, we still use racism. We are having wars, and we still using racism. We are trying to build a wall, but we using racism. We can't keep using racism for every little thing that comes up in society. That word makes everybody think that it's something to deal with African American. Racism is not just African American issue. That's all cultures. Because everybody feel like an outcast when you go to another country, another state. We have to understand racism is just not one culture. It's a multicultural issue. Until we understand that, we can't solve the problem. Everything starts at home. Teach your child how to interact if you get stopped by law enforcement or stopped by an individual that looks at you or say something negative. They didn't hurt you. Keep moving. Don't ascertain that individual. Don't argue with that individual. Just keep moving. Because if you do that, he or she is still talking to themselves. You've already left the scene. You've already kept moving forward. We have to stop this and move forward. And that's the issue. Education is the key. Training is the key on certain levels. And the thing is, respect each other. If somebody comes to your house, you want them to respect you. That's the main key.
That's right.
And respect goes a long way. Every parent on this planet want respect. They want respect from their kids. They want respect from their co-workers or any friends, associates they deal with. They want respect. Everybody wants respect. So I think it's a respect issue, education issue, and a training issue on certain levels and certain jobs. So we have to understand that different culture has different values and different beliefs. Certain cultures speak a different language. Everybody does not speak different. Everybody does not speak, let me rephrase that. There's a language barrier on the law enforcement side because a lot of law enforcement they are not bilingual. And if you're dealing with a culture in your area that's bilingual, make sure you have somebody there with you that's bilingual before you make that stop, because now you put that person live in jeopardy in yours. Because one, you don't know, you can't speak the language, so you don't know what he or she's trying to say. So make sure that you have somebody that's in that area that speak that language or deal with that culture or how to deal with that culture. Because everybody's different. We deal with things on a different basis. We can grow up, you got two brothers, but they think differently. But at the end, they understand each other. But still, they have their own way of thinking. Even if they're twins or identical, they still have their own way of thinking. So we have to look at it that way. Because racism is it's just a word we use to put an overcast on what the problem really is. And that's it.
Do you have any words for the people watching this, the youth, on like this problem? Like if they're going through obstacles, what should they do, and like how to keep moving forward in life?
On this issue of racism, we know African Americans are stigmatized on how they're perceived, how the law enforcement interact with us, any other ethnic background, but how you deal with it. You may not like it, but kill them with kindness. God say, be humble. He say, vengeance is his, says the Lord. So you taking action, it's the only thing it's gonna do is make it worse. But if you kill them with kindness, and if you get stopped, just call 911. Don't say nothing. You don't have to do but ask the officer twice. Now, if there's an issue, make sure you have somebody there, you're recording something, but just remember, call 911 and talk to them, give them a number of the patrol car, and if the officer does not abide to what you're thinking that's right or wrong, just tell 911, ask for his sergeant and lieutenant, come to the scene. So there's a recording of what he or she said. So now you have something to fight with. But with racism, we dealt with racism way longer than anybody. But still, it's going to be here when we're dead and gone. So how we deal with it on a daily basis is how we educate ourselves. We can't just jump and get mad, get angry because he or she says something or disrespect you or made you feel a certain way. But I think if you kill them with kindness, you're gonna have some good officers out there. They're gonna sit there and say, man, you know what? You can go ahead, have a nice day. And then you're gonna come up with people, law enforcement is gonna be, gonna be a gluteus maximus. Everybody know what gluteus maximus in the medical field is, but you're gonna have those type of people. You gotta have good and bad. You can't, it's an old saying, you cannot let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. So what we need to do is educate ourselves, regardless of what ethnic background. We need to make sure that respect each other, Because if he come up to the car and, he's soft-spoken, why should you get mad? That means if you're getting mad, that means you're in the wrong. Because that's something you're doing that you should not be doing. Drinking and driving, you can kill people. I've been there. I'm telling you, you got to watch it. You don't want to kill anybody drinking and driving, so watch what you do. You don't want to be intoxicated. That means by marijuana, pills, or whatever. You don't want to do that. You put other people's lives in jeopardy. You can't get mad because you're in the wrong. That individual is doing his job. He's trying to save somebody's life. But if you are in the right, you'll have avenues to follow. Kill him with kindness, take his badge number down, get his card. But if they're a good cop, you'll know right off the bat. They're going to hold a conversation. They're going to laugh with you. And every cop is not bad. And that's what life is. Knowledge, education, respect, and so on. And just remember, we can't do it by ourselves. So it takes a community, just like it takes a village to raise a child. The community has to come together to make a difference. And that difference is us coming together and going to the politicians and making this department of law enforcement do their job correctly, even if they have to fire this individual. But still, we have to do it as a community. We can't do it by ourselves. Martin Luther King said one thing. He said, I've been to the mountaintop, and guess what? He looked down and he said, what? Everybody should know that. Until then, we have to understand he was a very humble guy. They put him in jail, but he was still humble. Even though he felt like his day was already coming, but he still was humble. He had no malice or nothing. Jesus Christ wept, cried. Everybody say he got beaten, he got spit on. But at the end of the day, guess what? He still reigned. At the same time, we can't take it on ourselves. We can't do it by ourselves. To make a difference in our community, we have to come together as a community. Racism is a word that everybody uses to deter what's really going on. We already know that we have people out there working hard. You have people out there that can't get jobs. You have felonies that's getting out of prison, can't get a job. Well, they have no other means to sell drugs or whatever. We all know that everybody has to have a job. Regardless of what that job is, that's your preference. But just remember, there's pros and cons to whatever you do. If you rock that boat, you're the only one can sink that boat. That means if you're selling drugs, eventually you will be caught. So you have pros and cons. So when the law enforcement stop you, don't use racism. Use education. I'm wrong. So don't make it hard for everybody else. What we need to do is come together as a community, work as a community, respect each other as a community, and move forward in life. Life is good days and bad days. You're going to have ups and downs. Nothing is not going to be perfect every day. You're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. But at the end of the day, you're still here. That's why I say treat people with respect and keep it going. If somebody step on your shoe, don't get in an argument because you don't know if this guy's going to shoot you. You don't know what may happen. But if you treat them with kindness, walk away and keep it going, you can save a life. Maybe saving your own life. But
is there anything else that you would like to share that I didn't touch upon?
Say that again?
Is there anything else that you would like to share that I didn't get to touch upon, like get to ask you that you wanted to share out?
I've been on this earth 47 years, almost 47 years. I don't even look like I'm 47. Every time I look, everybody says I look like I'm 37. But I learned one thing over my life is respect. I can catch more flies and bees with honey than I can do with vinegar. And I think that we need to go back to the old ways and the understanding that we don't always have to be the facilitator or the aggressor in the situation because somebody talk down to you or say something negative to you. To solve that problem, treat them with kindness. But at the end of the day, you're going to reign as victorious by treating them with kindness. Some of us, we don't like that. You don't want to hear it. But at the end of the day, when everything is said and done, when you're by yourself in that jail cell, you would think twice about, man, I should have did this. I should have just kept my mouth closed. We always have a conscience. We always think about what we shoulda, coulda, woulda. So what I can give you is use your mind. Think about what you're gonna do and what you're gonna say before you do it. We all in society may not like cops, but guess what? They're here for a reason. If somebody breaks in your house, who you gonna call? In 911, a cop. So don't say you don't like cops. You just didn't like that cop. So guess what? There are still good cops out there that has families just like you and want to go home to them. So treat them with respect, regardless, even if they treat you bad. Treat them with respect. Work together as a community and do peaceful protest, because if you go outside those guidelines, you're gonna have problems. Like I say, pros and cons, but I always believe in the Lord. He's always been there for me. He's been taking care of me all these years. He's not gonna leave me. He's not gonna bring me this far to leave me. What I can leave you with is my experience in life. I'm blessed, and I'm still blessed. And I want everybody to share the same thing I feel. You may not believe in church, you may not believe in religion, but guess what? Every day you wake up, you're still blessed because you're above ground. Even if you're non-believer, you're still blessed. I don't care how you look at it. But just remember, somebody is counting on you. You have a child, you have a mother, you have a father, you have a brother and sister. If something happens to you, think about how they would feel if they lose you. So the best thing is, your mom and dad used to always say, kill them with kindness. And that's the only thing I can give you. Society as a whole, we think different. We think different than the next person. But our end goal is still the same. With this being said, I'm going to sign off, and I think that the world as a whole should work together, come on one accord, and respect each other. And from that, God bless America.